They called him Old Man Joe, not to his face at first, but in whispers that followed him down Titan Corp's marble hallways, laughter bouncing off glass walls as he pushed his squeaking mop bucket before sunrise, cleaning fingerprints off doors no one ever thanked him for, picking up coffee cups left behind by people who earned in a day what he earned in a month, wearing the same faded blue uniform with a crooked name tag that simply read Joe, no last name, because no one ever bothered to ask. And Joe heard it all, every joke, every insult, every dismissive sigh, because when you're invisible long enough you hear everything. By 5:47 a.m. he was already working, long before executives arrived in tailored suits, and one morning a young analyst tripped over his bucket and snapped, "Watch it, man, some of us have real jobs," followed by laughter, and Joe bent down slowly, picked up the papers, handed them back without a word, his hand shaking not from weakness but restraint, his eyes lingering on the Titan Corp logo stamped on the folder, built on vision, because once, long ago, Joe had helped build something too, just not like this. As rumors of layoffs spread, fear filled the building and fear made people cruel, and Joe became an easy target, a senior manager sneering. "Missed the spot, Joe, you sure you're not too old for this?" And Joe simply nodding, saying he'd clean it, because what they didn't know was that Joe hadn't always been a janitor, and the man about to walk through those doors, the powerful CEO Marcus Hale, hadn't always been a stranger. Years before Titan Corp was a skyscraper and a stock symbol, Joe Hale was a machinist, a single father working double shifts so his son could dream bigger, believing in honest work and humility. Beliefs his son eventually rejected, the argument still ringing in Joe's ears, Marcus shouting that Joe didn't understand ambition, that he was small-minded, that he'd never been more than grease-stained hands, laughing as he slammed the door, disappearing for 15 years, until now. On the morning of the layoffs, the building felt like a funeral. Silence thick in the lobby as emails refreshed and hearts raced. Joe pushing his cart quietly until the director blocked him and ordered him to clear the executive conference room because the CEO was arriving, telling him to be invisible. And Joe complied, wiping the long oak table when the door opened and Marcus Hale stepped inside, stopping mid-sentence. Confidence cracking as his eyes locked onto the janitor, time folding in on itself as he whispered, "Dad," the word hitting the room like shattered glass, executives frozen, confusion spreading, Joe straightening slowly, meeting his son's eyes and calmly saying hello. And in that moment power shifted, fear replacing arrogance as the truth settled in. The janitor they mocked was the CEO's father. Joe said he wasn't there to embarrass anyone, that work was work, and left the room, whispers exploding behind him, and that afternoon an emergency meeting was called. The auditorium packed as Marcus took the stage and admitted he'd forgotten what dignity looked like. Screens flashing complaints, harassment reports, footage of employees mistreating staff including Joe, names read aloud, senior executives terminated on the spot. Justice feeling close, almost satisfying, until Marcus's gaze locked onto Joe and he admitted there were things his father didn't know, decisions made, lines crossed, things he couldn't fix alone. The room holding its breath as the screen behind him changed again to reveal an active federal investigation. Joe's chest tightening as he whispered his son's name, asking what he'd done, Marcus meeting his eyes and quietly saying that the truth was coming. And just like that, the story everyone thought was over had only just begun. The room stayed silent after Marcus's confession. No applause, no outrage, just a low hum of the building as if Titan Corp itself was holding its breath, executives staring at the screen that now displayed the word internal and external review ongoing, and Joe standing there in his faded uniform realizing that respect had finally arrived, but it had come wrapped in fear. Because this wasn't just about how people treated a janitor anymore, it was about what his son had become. Marcus stepped down from the stage and walked toward Joe, his voice barely above a whisper as he said, "I didn't know it would go this far." And Joe looked at him, not as a janitor, not as a symbol, but as a father, asking one quiet question that cut deeper than any accusation. How many people got hurt before you remembered who you were? Marcus didn't answer, because at that moment his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, and all the color drained from his face as he whispered, "They're here," and through the glass doors at the back of the auditorium. Dark suit began to walk in, badges flashing, eyes scanning the room, while Joe felt a hand slip into his from behind, a young woman he'd once defended from mockery gripping his fingers and saying, "Mr. Joe, they're asking for you too." And as Marcus turned back toward the stage, surrounded by investigators, he looked at his father with panic in his eyes and said, "Dad, there's something in those files they're about to open, something I never told you." And before Joe could respond, an agent called his name. The doors shut behind them, and the question hung in the air. Was Joe about to learn that the son he raised wasn't just guilty of pride, but of something far worse? The agents escorted Marcus out of the auditorium while whispers rippled through the room like shockwaves. Joe standing frozen as memories of scraped knees and bedtime prayers clashed violently with the image of his son being questioned under fluorescent lights. The lead investigator turning toward Joe and saying softly, "Mr. Harris, your son cooperated, but there are inconsistencies, and your name appears repeatedly in these records." Joe's heart pounding as he followed them into a smaller room, where files were spread across the table revealing shell companies, falsified safety reports, and one damning detail that made Joe's breath catch. Marcus had approved cost cuts that led to a fatal accident at one of Titan Corp's overseas plants. An accident buried. Silence. Paid off. Joe whispering, "People died." And Marcus breaking down for the first time, saying, "I thought I could fix it later. I thought if I kept rising, I could make it right." But the investigator shaking his head and replying, "Power doesn't erase consequences." And just when it seemed the truth couldn't sink any lower, another agent walked in holding an envelope addressed in Joe's handwriting, old, yellowed, and opened. The agent saying, "This letter was used to justify a false narrative about your influence on company culture." Joe realizing in horror that his own words, written years ago to encourage his son to stay humble, had been twisted into a fake endorsement to shield corruption, the room spinning. As Marcus looked up and said, "Dad, I didn't know they'd use you," and Joe responding quietly, "But you let them." And as the agent prepared arrest papers, one of them paused, answering the call, then turning pale and saying, "Hold everything. There's been a whistleblower, anonymous, just submitted new evidence that changes the entire scope of this case." Marcus's head snapping up, hope flickering, Joe's stomach sinking, because the truth was no longer just about what Marcus had done, but about who had finally decided to speak. And the narrator's voice lowering as a question lingered. Was this confession about to save Marcus, or destroy Titan Corp entirely? Days later, the truth exploded into public view. The whistleblower revealed as the same young executive assistant Joe once offended when she was mocked for bringing him coffee. Her evidence exposing a network far larger than Marcus, executives who manipulated him, rewarded silence, and engineered the fall of anyone who resisted. Marcus ultimately accepting responsibility for his role and stepping forward in court, not as a CEO, but as a son who had lost his way. Joe sitting in the back of the courtroom as a verdict was read, not smiling, not crying, just holding the same mop-worn hands that had once built a home on honesty. And as Titan Corp collapsed under investigations and reforms, Joe returned to the building one final time, not to clean, but to walk through it as a reminder etched into company policy. Respect is not tied to titles. And the story ended not with revenge, but with reflection, because the janitor they mocked didn't rise to power. He stayed grounded, and in doing so, expose the truth the world keeps forgetting. How you treat people when you think they don't matter is exactly who you are. And somewhere behind prison glass and corporate ruins, Marcus finally understood that the real inheritance his father tried to give him was never influence. It was integrity. The courtroom was silent as the judge called the room to order. Marcus standing when instructed, his shoulders no longer squared with confidence but heavy with consequence. The headlines outside screaming scandal while inside the air felt thick with finality. The whistleblower's testimony replaying in everyone's mind. How executives groomed Marcus, praised his ambition, nudged him towards shortcuts, then hid behind him when the damage surfaced. The prosecutor laying it bare, emails, recordings, signatures, a system designed to reward obedience and punish conscience. And when Marcus was asked to speak, he didn't look at the jury first. He turned to the back of the room where Joe sat quietly, hands folded, eyes steady. And Marcus said, "I won't blame anyone else anymore. I made choices, and people pay the price. I forgot where I came from." His voice cracking as he added, "My father taught me to clean up my own messes. Today, I'm finally doing that." The judge listening, unmoved but attentive, before delivering the sentence, reduced the cooperation but heavy enough to mock the truth. Accountability had arrived. Outside, Titan Corp unraveled fast, board members resigning, assets frozen, policies rewritten under public pressure. The building Joe once scrubbed nightly now plastered with notices about ethics reform and worker protections. Reporters waiting for Joe, microphones pushed toward him, asking how it felt to be the CEO's father, to be mocked and proven right. And Joe answering simply, "I wasn't proven right, people were proven wrong." Then walking away, because his story was never about revenge, it was about value surviving power. Months later, the company reopened under new leadership, and on the first day, a plaque was mounted in the lobby, not with the donor's name, but with a single sentence. Dignity is not determined by title. Employees paused to read it, some remembering the old janitor who moved quietly through the halls, who listened more than he spoke, who saw everything while being seen by no one, and in a small apartment across town. Joe folded his uniform for the last time, not because he was ashamed of it, but because his work there was done. The final scene lingered on a prison visitation room. Marcus sitting across from Joe, older now, humbled, asking softly, "Do you still believe I can change?" And Joe answering without hesitation, "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." And as the guard called time, Joe stood, placing a hand over his heart, saying, "Remember, son, the world didn't fall apart because you were weak. It fell apart because you forgot who you were." And Marcus nodded, tears falling, finally understanding that the janitor they mocked was never powerless. He was a moral compass everyone else ignored.